Okay, here we are again. We are now on chapter 3, Wild, Shelley by MRC. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe now so you don't miss the future chapters. And then if you like this video. And if you want to read along, you can purchase your own hardcover, softcover, Kindle at Amazon, Shelley by MRC. I have the link in my description, and let's get to it. Bing, bang, bang, boom. Chapter 3, Mother. Deborah, also known as Mrs. Lancaster, continued to walk the streets of New York City, scrolling through her phone. None of this will help, she thought. Worthless. Why had Steve Jobs spent so much of his time inventing a global, high-technology, people web connector thing if it would be filled with nonsense posted by the public? People needed to get a better education. As she viewed different date options on her phone, swiping past man after man, Deborah continued to read the bio of one. He was a teacher. She moved on, continuing to scroll but reminiscing about her days as a schoolgirl. Images shuffled through her head. Hard-handed elementary teachers filled with scorn, belt-whipping parents harrowed by her homework grades, and college classmates she studied her freshman year, searching for potential husbands. The memories came and went like printed photos sliding from the front of a stack to the back. Deborah, however, kept her eyes elevated and her lips loose. Sorrow or grief, hurt or regret, anger or resentment were completely absent from her conscience as she flickered through these experiences. Joy and happiness were not present either. Inside, she felt the thing left after all is gone. It's not worth getting stuck on. A sentence she often repeated to herself and her kids. People moved with more annoyance on the street. Deborah noticed and mentally rolled her eyes. People need to learn to be happier nowadays, she thought. Trying to appease others, she made a few steps. Still in the middle of a mass transitory crowd, Deborah came to a sudden halt. As others forced new traffic flows around her, Deborah's focus snapped back to her phone. Soft eyes, a full head of hair, and not too physically out of shape. Deborah studied the man, her college schoolgirl feelings returning. Dating apps weren't so bad when good-looking people swiped yes for you. After all, Deborah had discovered that finding sane, single people, also in their late 40s, would not happen easily without technology's assistance. It either came from blind dates or, well, for her, it only came from blind dates. And those were blind for a reason. Before she made any rash decisions, Deborah exited the app and checked the time. Not a single minute left for online mingling. Her break ended in 40 minutes, and she wanted to use no more than half of it. Her work building towered 2.5 blocks away. Slipping her phone into her coat pocket, Deborah zipped it into safety. With speed, she rubbed her hands together and walked. I have no idea how I'm going to do these voices, but just expect that I'm probably going to end up doing Deborah's voice different than I did it in the last chapter, and I'm sorry. Hey, Deborah! Her boss Theodore poked his grinning face into her office. She stuck up her finger and hesitated before saying, Mrs. Lancaster? Right. He shot a finger gun at her. Mrs.? Or Miss. I prefer Mrs. It prevents any social incidents with the clients. Always thought you went by Miss. Anyway, how's the paperwork? Good? He smirked. Good. Stanford has more work for you to do. Check your email. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm going on break. He stretched his lips into a final smile and ducked his head out of view again. Thanks, Theodore, Deborah called out. Ted, he called from out of sight. Stanford Jones acted as prestigious as the school he shared his name with, though it all seemed more pretentious than prestigious to Deborah. To her, the man was as useless as his parents' entitlement for him. She accepted that her job at the insurance company included research and filing, investigation, etc., etc. She knew she had the responsibility to do most of the work, but not everything depended upon her. How could she file and research without the information she needed from her clients? Insurance providers needed compliance. Give and take. And of all the men she had worked with, Mr. Stanford did the most take. Opening her email, Deborah found the message containing his new claim information and typed a reply as she skimmed through the details. As usual, she needed to know more. I can't provide quality insurance without quality information, she thought. Continuous complaints filled her head, and yet she thrived on this. Her work gave her the chance to solve problems and provide protection to others, and so she gave her life to her work. For the clients that needed her help the most desperately, she became their savior. She grumbled about Stanford, but when her workday at the office finished, she would pack her files into her car, drive to her apartment, and work on his case at her home. The wood on the desk vibrated under her arms as Deborah's phone received a call. She swiveled in her chair and answered. Hey, what's up? Hey, Mom, Shelly said. How are you? Just working. What's up? Most of their calls started this way. without much taste or interest on either end. Not much. I saw that you called last night, and I was calling you back. I'm sorry I missed your call. Last night was not very fun. I was busy and... Anyway, is now a good time to talk? No. Deborah knew her answer. She needed to sort out the apparent flooding mess with her neediest client. The water had turned green, and he claimed it was now toxic or enchanted. And other claims continued to pile up, demanding attention. Work took priority, and Deborah thought her boss would not approve of talking on the phone during work hours. A good boss wouldn't, in her opinion. Although she admitted Theodore's attitude about personal calls and all workplace matters was about as friendly as his finger guns. Pleasant and non-threatening, but shamefully unprofessional. Thinking about the gesture made Deborah shift around in her seat. She put in more to this job than the other agents wanted to, and more than her boss expected her to. Deborah did not want to take the phone call. Deborah did not approve of the time usage. Despite her disapproval, she paused before expressing this. Normally, she would rush off, but she resisted. Some motherly instinct in her had noticed that her daughter seemed hurt at the mention of last night. Captured by curiosity, Deborah decided she would find out more about that first. Sure, what's up? You seem sad. I'm all right. I think I'm just tired. So nothing urgent or important, Deborah thought. Shelly continued. I feel like I'm doing a bad job with John. I'm a bad wife and I need to be better. I thought about searching up some ideas, but I haven't yet. I thought, you should do that. Deborah tried to encourage. I think searching it up sounds like a good idea. I thought I would talk to you first, though. See if you had any advice. I'm sorry, sweetie. I can't talk right now. I'm at work. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you could talk. No, I can't. I've got to go, but I love you. Inside her apartment, Shelly slumped into the love seat. Social media would need to provide her solutions. She returned to sifting through different apps on her phone. Emptiness led her actions as she entered a mindless state. None of her wanted to think about the disappointment from the phone call with her mom. None of her wanted to move on from it either. After sitting with her thumb hovering, she moved her attention to the matter at hand and opened a new web browser. How to be a better wife. After typing the words into Google, she swung her legs onto the couch, curled onto her side, and hit the search button. 10 tips for becoming a better wife. 30 ways to be a much better wife. 11 ways. Improve your marriage. 15 ways. 8 ways. 21 ways. 30 days. Why are you even trying? She thought. She blinked, clicked on an article, and read, It's not easy to be a wife. True, Shelly thought. There are days where I am tired from struggling to put the kids to sleep, and there are days when I sleep in. No harm, no foul, right? Until my husband has to get up not only to make his own to-go lunch before he leaves for work, but he also has to make breakfast for himself and the kids. Different moments such as these. Shelly exited the article with a twinge of pain. She needed information about wifehood, not motherhood. After a few deep breaths, she selectively thought about the article. Lunch making had not come to mind before. She couldn't recall one time when she had made lunch for John. Is that what she should do? Should they start eating breakfast again? She could go buy some Pop-Tarts, but the odds of her sharing those were low. The odds of her letting herself eat those were low. She continued searching. Articles flickered off and on her phone, giving her a streamline of advice. Nobody wrote articles that advised people in Shelly's situation. Nothing talked of suggestions for how a married, graduate school student wife could help her married, graduate school student husband. Articles advised on sex, complimenting, healthy living, sex, making your look more glamorous, sex, and choosing to have arguments rather than avoiding the conflict. Fight, don't flight. That one didn't turn out too great for Mom, Shelly mumbled to herself, filling the unused air. Swallowing the immediate guilt that appeared, Shelly tucked her hair behind her ears and pretended she had not made a negative comment about Mrs. Lancaster. She moved on to more articles and their advice. Somewhere, inspiration must strike her uninspired mind. The same notions from the other articles nested themselves into each blog post and magazine op-ed. Shelly could change and make her appearance amorous, solving sorrow with sex, or she could make John something to eat. She exited out of the search engine and checked the time on her alarm app, ignoring the time already appearing at the top of her phone screen. She needed specificity. She needed the time in seconds. 10:46, 48, 49, 50. John would come home in 24, soon to be 23 minutes. Cracking open the door, enough to create a body length of space, John slipped inside the apartment. After bad nights, Shelly typically took long mornings to recover. It made sense to John. Sleep withheld in the nighttime led to sleep stolen in the daytime. He felt sorry for his wife. She deserved rest, and so, on these post-morning mornings, he came back from his first class of the day like a ghost, leaving lights off and living in near silence until she was ready to get up. On rare occasions, Shelly's unsettled nights not only led to stolen mornings, but also lost afternoons. When these instances happened, John heaved Shelly out of bed and helped her prepare for an enjoyable night that she almost never enjoyed due to her inconsistent sleeping. This time, as John crept in from the broad daylight outside, he felt dizzy by the unexpected light illuminating from the inside of their apartment. Every bulb was on, and as John dropped his backpack by the side of the door, he noticed the front window's blinds were open. Because he came from the side without the window, he had not foreseen any of this and stood shocked. Beginning to accept the lighting levels in the apartment, a smell surprised him. Melted cheese? Shelly? No response. Logically, John could not conceive of a realistic scenario that involved Shelly, cheese, and danger, but regardless, an image of Shelly choosing to use a knife instead of the cheese grater appeared in his head. The likelihood of her missing the block and cutting her frail flesh suddenly seemed realistic enough for him. John walked to the kitchen in a calm rush. Calm in case he was overreacting, rushed in case something was wrong. Shelly stood with her back to John and her front toward their knockoff George Foreman. Shelly? In a kitchen corner, Shelly twisted to peek behind her and then swiveled around completely. She unplugged her headphones, allowing the wire to hang around her neck. Welcome home. Lunch will be ready soon. John leaned against the once white counter while he attempted to connect his thoughts. Shelly did not make lunch. She didn't need to. With his fueling habits, John had to learn simple cooking skills in high school. Eggs, sandwiches, microwavable meals. Having 3 younger sisters required partial self-sufficiency because no matter how involved his parents were, they didn't have the time to drop everything and make him a snack. Besides, they were involved enough that he could usually eat leftovers. Shelly's less involved mother, on the other hand, barely had time to provide any meal, including dinner, and in this aspect, she taught Shelly how to fish for takeout food. As far as John knew, when living alone with her mom, Shelly relied on the toaster for breakfast and her school cafeteria for lunch. He didn't know if Shelly even enjoyed cooking. She hardly made dinner, so why make lunch? The closer he came to the kitchen, the more certain John became that he could smell melted cheese. Are you making a grilled cheese? He asked, snagging a plastic cup out of the cupboard. The worn-down yellow matched the tone of the apartment. Grilled cheese and ham. And it's all for you. Shelly replied, uncommonly enthusiastic. John moved over to the sink and let water from the faucet into his cup as he questioned, I thought we were out of meat. Are you not making yourself one? I went to the store to buy some, and actually got a great deal on it. And no. Shelly fingered a spot where the roots of her hairline met at the back of her head. John glanced, on his toes, in case he noticed any nail involvement. I ate a big breakfast, she explained. What did you have? A peanut butter sandwich. Ah, a good PB&J. John poked Shelly's side and drank some water. Blah. Shelly stuck her tongue out. It did not have jelly in it. With a slight cough, John laughed and tried not to choke on his water. Jelly would taint the experience. Shelly lost her unnaturally upbeat tone as she defended her sandwich choices. Not for the first time. The ruffled look she gave could turn into an unraveling of tension or the building up of agitation. Taking his chances, John continued his pestering. Like a mistress to the sandwich. Shelly looked up into his hazelnut eyes, and the humor in his eyes reflected in hers. Smirking, she responded, Weird comparison, but sure, something like that. Leaning closer to Shelly, John left a little gap between them, one he intended to close soon. Then he noticed a smell other than cheese. Is the sandwich burning? No, it better not. No, it better not. The knock of grill chimed before John could press closer to Shelly, and she whipped around, nearly knocking the cup out of John's hand. He rebalanced the water and ensured that none of it sloshed out. Slouching over, Shelly slid past John to get a plate. Ugh, I set the timer for too long. I burnt it. Slapping the charcoal sandwich onto the contrasting white disposable plate, Shelly looked up at John, her lower lip slightly puckered out. Caught in the middle of drinking water once again, sound hammered out of John as he switched between coughs and laughs. Shelly scrunched her nose. I know, it's bad, she expressed, defeated. No, the sandwich looks fine. It's just, how long did you set the timer for? John struggled to identify the amount of heat needed to burn a grilled ham and cheese sandwich. At first, only 1 minute, Shelly said. But the cheese hadn't even melted, so I set it to 3 minutes, and then it melted a little, but not a lot, so I thought it needed longer. A lot longer. So I set it for 15 minutes, Shelly said. What were you laughing at, then? Your face. Her nose flattened, and she rubbed her lips in as her Irish green eyes bore into John. Laughing spilled out again, this time with less coughing. I meant I was laughing at the face you made, your expression. What? I think it's cute when your nose scrunches up. John closed the gap between them again and pressed himself into Shelly, wrapping one of his arms around her waist and placing down his water. Thank you for the sandwich. I love it, but not as much as I love you and your face. Shelly's lips lifted slightly and they kissed. John continued. Although, after I taste the sandwich, I might love it much more than both of those things. Scoffing, Shelly pushed John away and slid the plate over to him. Did you put on Neosporin? She said. Sure did. John reached for his plate. Before he grabbed a hold of it, Shelly stopped him, her hands approaching his arms. With a light touch, her fingers followed the lines of a few scratches. Looking at it made her feel as if someone had taken a sewing needle to her intestines and made her insides scabbed. It's not great, but it does look a lot better, she admitted. John placed his hand on Shelly's waist. I feel good. Don't worry. He glanced down at his plate. I'm going to eat now. Wonderings of why Shelly had made lunch disappeared. The smell of food partially distracted his hungered stomach, and he had too much fun joshing Shelly to hold an in-depth analysis of her actions. As John took his plate to the table, the sandwich brought him back to an important image. So, did you use the cheese grater to make the sandwich? Shelly looked at him with light confusion. You meant to slice the cheese? Yeah, there's nothing else to use. Cool. John bit into his charcoal sandwich. Sandwich number 1 did not go so well. More planning would need to go into sandwich number 2. Shelly could have made John the same sandwich that she had eaten for breakfast, but that required 1. Giving up her peanut butter, 2. Risking John wanting to add jelly and ruining the integrity of the sandwich, 3. Needing to rethink her flirtation tactics. Point 3 mattered less than the others, as Shelly had not said her planned one-liner. She had predicted John would ask why she chose to make a grilled cheese and ham sandwich, since Shelly had not made many lunches, so why now? And why this? When this happened, Shelly would have responded, I wanted to make a hot sandwich for my hot husband. Or, I wanted to make a meal at least half as hot as you are. She hadn't been able to decide which one to use, and when the moment came, she opted out of the one-liner entirely. Reviewing it over in her head, Shelly felt okay about the missed opportunity. Grilled cheese buns weren't really that sexy. Shelly continued to ponder the future lunch options as she slung on her satchel, left the apartment, and walked up the neighborhood sidewalk. Chicken sandwich, chicken wrap, chicken nuggets. Most people did not have such a scenic walk to school. On the east, the mountains rose high, covered in a blanket of orange and red. Any visitor would stop and stare, but Shelly had grown used to the giant pieces of earth surrounding her. Instead of admiring Keeve Peak, her beige knitted keds shifted fallen leaves out of her way, making contact with them, but not crunching their fragile structure. As she protected the leaves from a crushing end, her wide ankle socks protected her from scratches as she passed by the tree's departed friends. Pale yellow, pale orange, litter, pale brown. Sometimes autumn brought out nature's beauty, and with the sun shining that day, pale seemed pleasurable. Shelly glanced at her hands, attached to the inside of her jean pockets by her thumbs. Her skin did not pass the vampire code, nor did it pass the social standard of sun-kissed skin. No feelings of love or hate toward her skin ruled Shelly's past opinions about herself, but surrounded by the tree's vibrant, unattached leaves, she felt a bit uncomfortable. As an undergraduate student, it had taken almost half an hour for Shelly to walk to her classes. Among the mountains surrounding Provo, BYU rested upon a slant in the middle, not too far from trails or hiking. Since she had lived southwest of campus, she got her hiking in by walking to school. After strolling up the slanted sidewalk, she would reach the edge of campus and need to mount the worst, increasingly inclining slab of black concrete. With the trees surrounding her sides, she wouldn't see the sign of buildings until she reached the top of the hill. A few students would pass her on the way up, not necessarily because of her lack of physical ability, but because of her lack of desire to exert energy. Even the untrained, unfit freshmen who biked to school would pass Shelly on that steep path. After taking the easiest pace possible, sometimes at the top of the hill, she wasn't out of breath, a difficult achievement for students living south of campus. This excluded the few who drove cars or made it in time for the shuttle. It would be quite unusual for those in vehicles to be out of breath upon arrival to campus, although, undoubtedly, it happened. However, because Shelly now lived directly south of campus, she no longer walked up that arduous concrete path. Instead, the slight move meant she had to face the duck pond stairs that would put Rocky to shame. Only the brave, and the students without other options, used those stairs. For her first class, Shelly ensured she had a hybrid option, to allow her time to prepare for the climb. A couple blocks from the pond, A woman pushing a stroller came down the opposite end of the sidewalk. Flushing, Shelly stepped to the side and walked on the grass. Leaves crunched beneath her, but she was too distracted to wince at the wrecking. A part of her knew better, but before the woman passed, Shelly peeked into the stroller, a newborn with plump cheeks. She gave a faint smile, her eyes not quite making it back to the mother, and her attention snapped to the leaves that had wandered onto the street. Until the woman, the stroller, and the baby passed, it stayed there. At her destination, Shelly stayed in her head and relied on habit as she walked the brick path that cut through the grass and past the dunk pond, found a brown bench, and sat down. It made her bottom cold, but she preferred this over sweaty pits and failing lungs. As she came to herself, she put on a hotspot paid for by her mom's phone plan and flipped open her creaking laptop. Her fingers moved based on muscle memory. One tab, Zoom. Another tab, Google Docs. A final tab, an open search bar. She blew away the hair tickling her face. Every so often, Shelly thought about skipping her classes, but as one of 8 studio art graduate students, her professors would notice. People would talk, ask why, and Shelly didn't want that. No one else had entered the Zoom room 10 minutes early. She sat staring at the black box on her screen, waiting to start Art 626, current art practice. Likely the teacher wouldn't turn on their video until 2 minutes before class started. That was okay. Shelly couldn't bring herself to paint, but she could bring herself to the classroom. Taking down notes required less internal exploration than painting portraits, as long as she did not linger on emotional topics and focus on the academic aspect. Shelly wondered why anyone would go to graduate school for art if they didn't plan to become a professor. Why did she do it? For fun? For education? For a distraction? When she had applied, she had done it because her mom insisted. If accepted, she had never intended to attend. If her situation hadn't changed, it would have been easier to do what she wanted and not what her mom wanted her to do. That annoyed her. John had the right to question why she had chosen this. The two had married in the October of the junior year of her undergraduate degree. John had witnessed Shelly constantly using her creativity and paint to cover new canvases for her school assignments. Paintings used to line the walls and floors of their bedroom. After she graduated, she would paint for as long as she had daylight. She had spent her time entering competitions and galleries, but despite any accomplishments, Mrs. Lancaster could not understand why her daughter did not pursue a higher education. You could go into business, work in a well-paid position for companies like mine. If you stay in painting, you at least need a higher degree. Trust me, I know about these things. But Shelly had preferred staying home, painting, and selling. She thought she might set up a booth at the farmer's market in June. Near the end of spring, that changed. Shelly threw the paintings into the closet and left the room plain. Too clean. She listened to her mom and pursued her graduate degree as an artist. It felt pointless. She didn't paint anymore. Even the sides of her school notebooks were blank and orderly, rather than covered with a chaos of drawn eyes, noses, and hands. Why was she there? She didn't want to do this. She wanted to be home. She wanted to stay at home. Shelly's nose scrunched up so much that her entire face wrinkled. She needed to focus. Class had started. The teacher began by talking about an upcoming competitive art exhibition, Art Ops, held by the Utah Division of Arts and Museums. Students were required to participate. Shelly had already looked up all the information for it and figured she could use some of her unseen work, so she unlocked her phone and pulled up the messaging app. "I miss you," she texted John. She stared at the text for a minute until 3 dots appeared and let her know John was typing back. "I miss you too. ... Thanks for the sandwich." For a moment, her pragmatic problems about graduate school were subdued. End of chapter 3. If you liked this video, like this video, and if you want to see all the other readings I'm going to do, keep along with the chapters, subscribe, and you can read along. You can get your own copy, hardcover, softcover, Kindle, link in description on Amazon. And thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this chapter. Definitely let me know your thoughts about everything going on with Shelly and the book and the characters. What did you think meeting Deborah, Mrs. Lancaster? I'm curious. Anyway, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you later. Bye.